Yo, what is up? Welcome to Ninja Geek Games. So I've been playing Nemesis recently and I'm planning on completing a playthrough for the Untold Stories campaign. But before I do that, I'm going to paint the miniatures and I'm going to do this using the Citadel contrast paints. Now I'm using these as they cut some corners, meaning that I save time, but also provide a pretty good finish. What I've decided to do is separate the intruders by type and paint each group using a different colour scheme to try and show a process of maturation of the alien life cycle. For the larva, I hope to have these looking fresh and vulnerable as they progress to creepers, adults and breeders, having the cuticle change from blue to greenish to black. For the queen, I'm going to try a colour shift paint. For the characters, I'm also sticking to the basics, so the soldier will be red and the captain will be blue, etc., maybe with some added highlights. All the characters are going to have a grey seer undercoat. And for the intruders, the larva and the creepers will also have this grey seer undercoat, and the adults, breeders and queen will have a lead belcher. Now this silver should hopefully provide a metallic look to the cuticle once we add the contrast that we can dull down a little later with some shade. So let's coat them. So I've used grey seer undercoat on all of the characters, the larva, the creepers, the 3 turrets and the cat first player token. Now when using the contrast paints, it's really important that the whole of the miniature is covered properly, as the contrast paints are quite unforgiving in areas where the base coat isn't properly applied. So we're going to clear this area and make a start with the larva first. Now because the larvae are quite small, the first thing I'm going to do actually is the base. And the finish I want is a rusted metal plate look. And that'll have a base of black, a layer of lead belcher and a very light highlight of blue, which is quite simple to do. But because we'll be painting these like a pinky red colour, if you did that bit first and then did the black for the base, any black that goes onto the pink larva will stand out and it's quite a pain to cover that up. So all I'm going to do is water down a little bit of black, Abaddon black, and do the base. So we've covered the bases in Abaddon black. We've also gone over any areas where we got black onto the larva with the grey. And now that it's all dry, we are going to use Volupus pink contrast. And when using the contrasts, you'll sometimes get a ring of sediment at the bottom of the pot. So you'll need to give them a good shake before you use them. And my thinking for pink is they are newborns, freshly hatched, without a thick skin. So they need to hang about the ship or eat someone to develop that tough hide. And we'll select this model. So if you haven't used these shades before, they're a bit like an ink, that's what they feel like. And they create shadow and highlights as well. I've not actually used this pink. It's quite dark, so I might have to go over with it with some highlights after. I'll do all the model. We may have to do 2 coats. Okay, so we've had the pink contrast applied to the larva and they're starting to look pretty cool. There's actually 3 larva on one model. So now we're going to just give it a light shade of Drakenhof Nightshade, which is a blue shade, just to give it a hint of that colour, because the next steps when we do the creepers, they're going to have a deeper blue tinge to them. So this will just be a light application of the Drakenhof blue. So now that the shade has dried on the larva, we're going to do a very light dry brush of Emperor's Children. And this is just going to lift and separate that pink colour I was looking for. So I only want a little bit on the brush, not too much. It really is just going to lightly touch the surface. And here you can see these two have had the pink highlight and just have that nicer shade of pink, making them look a little bit more fleshy. So the only thing really left to do on the lava miniatures is the base. And what I'm going to do here is use lead belcher just to lightly go over the top of the base. I'll then give it a wash in Nuln oil and a quick highlight in a lighter silver and blue. It's just to go over the top so it doesn't go down any of the gaps. And then once that lead belcher is dry on the base, we can then use the Nuln oil shade on the rest. And this should cover up any of the gaps you left when painting with the Abaddon Black. The last thing I'm going to do with the lava is give them a very light dry brush in the Praxetti white. These 5 here, I've already had it, and it really is just touching the brush onto those raised surfaces. Very, very subtly. So one of the last things we're going to do with the larvae is we're going to touch up the bases with Runefang steel to give the flooring that metallic look. We're literally just going to touch the paintbrush to the raised areas just to give it that shine. And I hope you can see that this base, the flooring here looks a lot lighter than the other 5. And once we've done all that, we can then touch up the edge of the base with the black. Okay, so I think the larvae are finished. They look like pink, wrinkly parasites, forever searching for and needing food, just like children. So now we can make a start on the creepers. So next we'll begin with the creepers. These are a much larger model than the lava we've just completed. And we're going to follow a similar process where we paint the base Abaddon Black. The model itself is going to be contrast grey. And then we'll give that some blue shade once the contrast is dry. So the creepers here have had their application of the contrast grey. And this is one of my favourite colours for the contrast paints. It gives it a stone charcoal look. But what I want to do is give it a blue tinge so that we get this feel of maturation and change from the lava, which are like a dark purpley blue, to the growth of the creepers, which will have this blue tinge in the cuticle. And to do that, we're going to apply a shade of Drakenhof Nightshade. And I'm going to be quite liberal with this. The dark areas that are already on the creepers are going to eat up this shade, so I'm going to put quite a lot on. Hopefully it will give it that very dark grey-blue hue to the cuticle. So just to show you the difference after adding the blue shade, this one here has had the blue shade, this one hasn't. And this one here has a very dark blue hue to its exoskeleton. I'll probably bring it out with some dry brushing of lighter blue, but I just wanted to show you the difference in contrast at the minute. So now we'll do this one and then we'll look at bringing out this blue colour. So now that the blue shade has dried, we are just going to do a highlight of Calgar blue, but we're going to do this as a dry brush. And we are just going to touch the brush against the raised edges of the exoskeleton. Just to show you the difference, if you can tell, these two have had the blue dry brush, this one hasn't. So we're going to make a start on the bases by lightly painting with lead belcher, shading with null oil, and a highlight of the Runefang steel. So the bases on these creepers are complete. They've had the lead belcher, a light touch of Runefang steel, a dry brush of the Calgar blue, and then a little dab of this Typhus Corrosion. Gives it a rust-like appearance. So I used the blue as a dry brush, and I think it just makes it look like so overhead lights are shining down on the metal flooring. I don't do it in every single area. It is very, very subtle. I think it makes a nice contrast to the silver. I'll just let that dry for a few minutes. Now this Typhus Corrosion is a technical paint. You really don't want too much on your brush because it comes out very, very dark and it feels somewhat gritty. And again, this is another dry brush technique. And I'll just touch it over the areas I've done in blue. That's it. And I'm going to use this technique for the bases on the adults, breeders and the queen as well. Okay, so we're on to the adults. They have a base paint of lead belcher, and we're going to use this contrast Achelian green. So as before you start painting, just remember to give it a really good shake. Also make sure the lid is on properly. Whilst you do that, we'll end up saying a few swear words. So again, quite a liberal application of this. And the first thing you're going to notice is it is really, really bright. But it does, when it dries, it does dull down a little bit. And if you think that's a little too bright, you can always add some shade to it. So we'll come back to this when it's finished. But I'm not new to contrast paints. I've used quite a lot before. Jasco Games sent me Evil Dead. And if you look at some previous videos, I'll put a link at the end of this one. You can see some of the painting I've done on there. And what I did was paint all the characters and the main monsters using a variety of the contrast paints. But for the deadites, I think there were like 25 deadites, I've just used the grey to give them this charcoal look, every single one of them, and then splattered them with a bit of blood. And it looks really, really cool on the board, so you know which ones are the deadites quite easily just from this charcoal grey outline of the miniatures. So now that we've applied the Achelian green and let it dry, it's got this really cool green-blue metallic colouring to the cuticle of the adults. I think it stands out really, really well. We're just going to do the bases very similar to how we did those on the creepers. That should then complete the adults. So the adults are finished. I've finished their bases. I think they look pretty good, considering it's just an undercoat base layer of the contrast Achelian green, and then a very simple colour scheme for the bases. So I'm very happy with them. Now we'll go on to the breeders. This model here is one of the breeders. You get two of these. Just to show the size comparison, those models are massive. I'm in two minds of what colour to do these, because the adults have that nice metallic blue look, but I might try and progress these to a metallic purple. Now I don't have the paints for that, so what I'm going to do is use the contrast grey, and once that's dry I'm going to go over in the Magos purple, which is also a contrast paint, hoping that will give the exoskeleton a really deep purple black metallic shine. It's quite likely that I'll need 2 coats of the purple. So with the black, again, you can do quite a liberal coat. I have tried the purple directly over silver and it's just too light, and too much of the silver seeps through. It becomes almost transparent, the purple. So I'm hoping this black allows the purple to be highlighted a little bit more. So the contrast grey has been applied and dried onto the breeder, and that looks pretty good in that grey black, which are actually going to be the predominant colours of the Queen. And then we're going to give this a second coat. We're going to give it contrast Magos purple, and hopefully this will give a really, really deep metallic purple colour to that exoskeleton. The purple over the grey black might need a couple of coats, but I think it's going to look really nice. So the breeders have had their coat of Magos purple over the contrast grey, and you can see it just kind of stands out. I really like that. A nice metallic deep purple look to their exoskeleton. And I think that's all that's left for them, is to do the bases. And again, we'll use the lead belcher, Runefang steel, touch of the Calgar blue, and then the technical corrosive paint on top. So there we go, the breeders are now complete. They've had their bases done and they look pretty awesome. Okay, so this is the Queen. This is the biggest model, the one with probably the most detail on as well. She's holding one of the larvae, lifting up a floor panel with them all coming out here. So what I've done, it has a lead belcher undercoat, and the head and the shoulders have a base of black, and then I've gone over the lead belcher here and here for the larva in the grey cere, so that I can replicate the larva I did at the start of the video in these. Now as I'm using the contrasts, I'm not really going into that much detail, although they may look pretty good. They're not going to have that level of detail as some of my other models. So some of the goo and ooze here, I'm just going to leave and paint it varying shades of silver. Some of it might hit the contrast pink, but I'm not going to be too worried about that. And I've done these bits black because this is where I'm going to apply the Darth Blue, which is the colour shift paint. The first thing I'll do is all the silver will have the contrast, because I want her to have this metallic black look, a bit like the Queen from Aliens, I guess. Okay, so now we're going to apply the colour shift metal Darth Blue to the base black areas of the Queen. This needs to be shaken quite well before use. As you can see, it looks like a pinky purple colour. So I've not used this before. And you can already see this metallic shift in it, of blues and purples. So the Queen has had the colour shift applied. The body is the contrast grey, and I've used the contrast pink for all the larvae. Now I really like the colour shift Darth Blue, which I've done her head and shoulders in. But what I've also done is done subtle streaks on the front of the legs the arms and along the top of the tail. And as it's quite subtle, I think it looks quite good. So all I think that's left for the queen is to shade the larva with the Drakenhof Nightshade, give them a quick highlight with a dry brush of Emperor's Children, and the base will have Null Oil on the Lead Belcher, followed by a Rune Fang Steel dry brush. So we've only got a few bits for the queen to do. We have some dry brush of the Rune Fang Steel on the silver parts of the base, and then a dry brush in the Emperor's Children on the larva. So we're just going to lightly go over the raised areas, just touching them. I probably need to do a bit more than I realised because I think I've overdone the Null Oil. Once that's done, I'll just complete the base. And with the dry brush of the pink onto the larva, again, you don't want this too heavy. You just want to pick up those edges on the dry brush. In an ideal world, we would use a brush to carefully paint all of the raised edges. I'm just demonstrating a quick, effective method to pimp out your board. So you can do this en masse. You can see it's already been picked up on those raised areas. And there we go, we have one badass completed queen model. So as for the characters in the game, each of them will just get a coat of contrast paint whose colour will correlate to the player board and the rings that go under the bases. I will do the bases like the intruders, but these guys will just have one simple coat of the contrast. So all of the characters are now done. Each has their own unique contrast paint as based on the coloured ring of that character. I have added a dry brush effect just to separate the colours a bit, and it would have been nice to paint them properly and individually, but as I said in this video a few times, I just wanted a very quick, but I just wanted to get a quick decent method to get some paint onto the figures so you can get them onto the board as quickly as possible. So these are the three turrets you get. They'll first have the Skeleton Horde contrast, shading with the Agrax Earth Shade, and then a dry brush with the Zandri Dust. And when this is dried, the Agrax Earth Shade gives it that mechanical look. So the three turrets have had two coats of the contrast Skeleton Horde paint. Instead of using the Agrax Earthshade, I applied a second coat. The Zandri Dust, we are just going to apply a light dry brush just to lighten it up. And this brush again just touches those edges. And the turrets have had their base and they look pretty cool. I'm quite happy with those. Now for the first player token, I don't actually have a contrast orange colour. So this will be the only miniature in the game that does have a proper base coat, and we are using Jacaro Orange, and then we'll layer that with Fire Dragon Bright. So this orange is going to form the suit of the cat. Its helmet will be yellow, and the piping will be contrast grey, I think. Oh, it looks a lot brighter on the model than it does in the pot, which is good. Quite worried this was going to be like a brownie orange. It's coming off onto the miniature quite nicely. So I'm in two minds of what colour to do the cat fur. There is this Gore Grunter fur, but it's quite dark. So I think I'm going to go for the contrast Griff Charger Grey, which is like a blue-grey colour. Something a little different. Might need a couple of coats of this. Got to be careful about applying too much in one go, because it seeps down and you'll get a lot of the paint into the cracks. The piping at the back is having the contrast grey. What I'll do with this is give those ridges a highlight in a Dawnstone grey, so it doesn't look so dark. And the lid we're going to do in contrast yellow. We will give this a highlight in a nice light yellow, just to separate the colour from the orange. So now we can start some shading, and we're going to use a Fugan orange shade for the cat's spacesuit. And we'll definitely need this because we've used a normal base coat instead of a contrast paint. So the base coats have dried. So what I'm going to do now is give the suit a dry brush in Fire Dragon Bright. Normally I would apply this as a layer using a layer brush, but I want all the miniatures to have the same paint style. So this will just bring out that really bright orange of the suit. And the piping is just going to have a touch of the Dawnstone grey. Okay, I think the first player token is finished. Okay, so everything's painted, looking pretty sharp. I'm really excited to get these to the table. I'm really happy with how the adults, the breeders and the queen turned out. I really like that metallic look to the exoskeleton they have. The next thing to do is I'll do a little section with these on the board so you can see what they look like. And in the next video we'll do a playthrough of the first mission in the Untold Stories campaign. This is Ninja Geek Games. Thanks for watching.